Have you ever witnessed something so raw, so painfully real, that for a moment you thought you'd accidentally stumbled into a live soap opera? That's exactly how this story begins. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in my quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of morning where the air feels too still, where every sound carries, and where you assume the most dramatic thing you'll hear is a lawnmower starting up 2 streets over. I was sitting at my desk upstairs, laptop open, sipping on iced coffee while my cat sprawled lazily across the windowsill. The kind of peaceful, mundane scene that makes you believe the world outside your walls is just as calm. But then, out of nowhere, came the yelling. At first, I thought maybe someone was watching TV a little too loud. The shouting was muffled, but sharp. I froze, cup halfway to my lips, ears straining. But the longer I listened, the more I realized this wasn't television. This wasn't some Netflix drama playing in the background. This was real. I pushed my chair back, padded softly to the window, and with the kind of nervous curiosity that only pure drama inspires, I pulled the blinds just enough to peek outside. What I saw made my heart skip. There she was, my neighbor, standing barefoot on her front porch in pajama pants and a tank top, her hair wild and her face flushed. And she wasn't just yelling, she was screaming. And then I saw him. Her husband, dragging a giant black suitcase across the porch steps, hauling it like a man on a mission. He wasn't looking at her, not once. His jaw was clenched, his eyes locked on the car in the driveway. Her voice cracked as she shouted at him, "So you're just gonna walk out after everything?" My stomach twisted. There was something in her tone, equal parts rage and heartbreak, that made it impossible to look away. But the man didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. He just kept walking, suitcase wheels bumping across the wooden porch. She tried again, her voice hoarse, desperate. "Be a man for once and say it to my face." Still nothing, not a glance, not a word. And then came the line that froze me in place. "You'll regret this when she leaves you too." I nearly dropped my iced coffee. Who was she? At that exact second, the husband yanked open his car door, threw the suitcase inside, and with a slam of the door, he was gone. Tires screeched, rubber burned against the pavement, and he was out of sight. My neighbor stood there, chest heaving, her bare feet on the porch boards. And for a moment, I thought that was it. That was the big scene. A husband storming out, a wife left behind in ruins. But oh, how wrong I was. Not even 10 minutes later, another car appeared. Sleek, polished, a silver BMW. It rolled up the driveway like something straight out of a Beverly Hills soap set. And when the door opened, my jaw literally dropped. It wasn't a friend. It wasn't a cousin. It was her sister. She stepped out in heels that clicked against the driveway, her outfit pristine, hair perfectly in place, sunglasses perched like she was about to walk into a high-end brunch spot, not the aftermath of her siblings' marriage imploding, and the look on my neighbor's face when she saw her. Pure venom. "Of course you show up now," she screamed, storming down the steps. The sister didn't hesitate. She fired back instantly, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet street. He needed someone who actually listens to him for once. I choked on my coffee. Did I hear that right? The two of them stood face to face. The tension so thick I swear the air buzzed. My neighbor's hands flew as she pointed, jabbed, shoved her sister's shoulder. Her voice cracked as she shouted, the words that would burn into my memory forever. "He was my husband, and you were supposed to be my sister." And the sister? She didn't shout this time. She didn't push back. She just looked at her, calm as ever, and said in the coldest, most dismissive tone I'd ever heard, "He told me you would do this." Then she turned, walked back to her car with her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the driveway, and drove away. Just like that. My neighbor stood there frozen, fists trembling, eyes wide. The scream died on her lips. She didn't chase her. She didn't throw anything. She just stopped, and for 5 whole minutes, she didn't move. She stood rooted to that spot on the porch like her brain couldn't catch up with what had just happened. And then, slowly she turned and disappeared inside the house. I remember leaning against the window, heart racing. My cat blinked at me. Like, what the hell did we just witness? I thought it was over, that the scene was finished, that the credits should roll right there. But oh no, that was only Act 1. Because half an hour later, the next episode of this live soap opera began. I thought it was over, I really did. After the husband stormed off and the sister drove away in that smug little BMW, the neighborhood fell eerily quiet again. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder if you imagined the entire thing. I even sat back down at my desk, trying to focus on my emails, but my mind kept replaying it all. The suitcase, the shouting, that dagger of a line. He was my husband, and you were supposed to be my sister. You don't just bounce back from hearing something like that, even as a bystander. But then maybe 30 minutes later, I heard something else. A new sound. Clinking, sharp, metallic. I frowned, pushed my chair back again, and tiptoed to the window. And there she was. My neighbor, outside once more. This time she wasn't screaming, though. No. She was holding wine bottles. Empty ones. One by one, she lifted them and hurled them into her trash bin. The glass clinked and crashed against itself, echoing through the stillness of the street. But here's the thing. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't casually cleaning up. No, she was doing it slowly, methodically, like a performance. She'd lift the bottle, tilt her head back as though weighing its history, then drop it with a dramatic clatter. She wanted someone to hear. She wanted the world to know she was breaking. Shattering, just like the glass. I pressed closer to the window, Kat still watching with me like this was the season finale of our new favorite drama. After a few bottles, she stopped. She didn't go back inside. Instead, she sank down onto the curb, the summer heat rising from the asphalt around her. And then, something I had never seen before. She lit a cigarette. Now I'd known this neighbor for years. Friendly waves at the mailbox, small talk about garbage pickup schedules, the occasional holiday cookies exchanged. She wasn't a smoker. Not once, not ever. But that night, she sat hunched on the curb, smoke curling from her lips, staring into the empty street as though her entire life had collapsed in the space of an hour. And in a way, it had. There's something haunting about watching someone hit rock bottom when you know it's happening in real time. You're not reading it in a novel, not hearing about it days later. You're seeing it unfold, raw and unfiltered, 20 feet from your window. For 10 minutes, maybe more, she just sat there, silent, except for the occasional drag and exhale, no tears, no yelling. Just a hollow kind of stillness, the kind that feels heavier than screaming. Eventually, she stubbed the cigarette out on the curb, stood up slowly, and disappeared back into the house. This time, when the door shut, it felt final. Remember sitting back in my chair, heart pounding, fingers itching to text my husband who was still at work? I did, of course. I typed, "You're not going to believe what's happening across the street. It's like watching a live telenovela." But even as I sent it, I couldn't shake the feeling that what I'd witnessed wasn't just drama. It was devastation. Hours passed. The blinds across the street closed. Her house went dark. The BMW didn't return. The husband's car stayed gone, and yet I couldn't stop thinking about her. Was she okay? Was she alone? Would she even make it through the night without completely unraveling? I lay in bed that night, replaying every word, every scream, every clink of glass. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to just watch anymore. Because sometimes, when someone's world collapses right next door, the least you can do is knock on their door with something warm. A gesture. A sign that they're not invisible. The next evening, that's exactly what I did. But before I get there, let me tell you what happened inside her house when I finally stepped in, made the shouting on the porch look like child's play. The following evening, I stood at my kitchen counter staring at a plate of food. Pasta, a little steak, some garlic bread on the side. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy, just dinner. But to me, it wasn't about the food. It was about the gesture. Because after everything I'd seen, her husband storming out, her sister's betrayal, the cigarettes on the curb, I couldn't shake the image of my neighbor sitting there, hollow and broken. So I grabbed that plate, added a couple of brownies my husband had baked earlier, and walked across the street. Now, let me tell you, I was nervous. My palms were sweaty, and my brain was firing off every possible worst-case scenario. What if she slams the door in my face? What if she thinks I'm pitying her? What if she explodes again and I'm standing there holding garlic bread like an idiot? But when I rang the doorbell, something unexpected happened. She answered almost immediately, and the woman standing in front of me didn't look like the furious, fiery neighbor I'd seen 24 hours earlier. She looked drained. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her eyes tired and rimmed red, her shoulders slumped. But when she saw the plate of food in my hands, her lips twitched into the faintest smile. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. I shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "It's just dinner. Thought you could use a break." To my surprise, she opened the door wider. "Come in." Now, I'd only been inside her house maybe once before, but stepping in that night felt entirely different. The lights were dim, shadows stretching across the living room. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the counter, condensation sliding down its side. She led me to the kitchen table. I set the plate down, and she poured herself another drink. Then she sat across from me, resting her chin on her hand, staring at the food like she wasn't sure whether to eat or talk first. Finally, she sighed. "You want the short version or the long version?" she asked, her voice flat. I blinked. "Whichever you're comfortable sharing," she chuckled bitterly. Comfortable? That's a word I don't think exists in my life anymore. And then she started talking. Not the hesitant, guarded kind of talking people do when they're protecting themselves. No, this was a floodgate opening. She told me everything, how she'd found out about the affair by accident. One stray notification popping up on her husband's iPad when he left it charging in the kitchen. A message from her sister. Not even subtle, explicit, undeniable. "I knew the second I saw it," she said, swirling her wine. I didn't even need to scroll. That one message was enough. But I did scroll, and it was worse than I imagined. I stayed quiet, letting her set the pace. She went on. How she'd confronted him, cornered him, demanded the truth. And to her, shock, he hadn't even fought it. He'd confessed, just like that. "That's what you saw yesterday," she said. "The fight, the suitcase, the screaming. That was me realizing my whole life was already gone, and him admitting he'd handed it to her." She spat the word like poison, her. But then, her tone shifted. "I mean, I made it easy for him," she said suddenly. That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She leaned back, eyes half closed. "I haven't been emotionally available in months. I checked out, focused on myself, my work, my own little bubble. I knew he was lonely. I knew he was starving for attention. And instead of feeding the marriage, I let it wither." Her words hung heavy in the air, but then she snapped her gaze back to me and her voice hardened. Still, he could have come to me. He could have fought for us. He could have tried. But no, he crawled to her. Of all people. My sister. Her face twisted with disgust, and I saw the raw wound again beneath the surface. That's when she explained the deeper truth. That her sister had always been jealous. Always competing. Always comparing. From childhood, it had been a toxic rivalry dressed up as sibling banter. Who had better grades? Who looked prettier at prom? Who got more attention at family holidays? "It never stopped," she muttered. Even as adults, she couldn't let me have one thing without needing to take it, ruin it, or prove she could do it better. And now, she took my husband. She won the crown she's been chasing since we were kids. Her hand shook slightly as she lifted her glass. "But here's the thing," she said quietly. "I'm not even sure I lost." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" She smirked. A chilling little smirk that didn't match the tears threatening at the edges of her eyes. I'd already checked out of that marriage months ago. I wasn't happy. I wasn't in love. I just wasn't ready to be the one to end it. Because ending things, that means you lose. And I don't lose. For a moment, I just sat there stunned, because the way she said it, the calm, calculated tone, made me realize something. She wasn't just a victim here. She wasn't just the betrayed wife left behind in ruins. She was already strategizing, already thinking about damage control, family dynamics, her reputation, her upper hand. In fact, she admitted she'd already called her mother that morning and told her not to reach out to her sister. "I made it clear," she said with an icy confidence. "The family chooses sides, and they're choosing mine." She paused, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "He thinks he won something. She thinks she beat me. But the truth? I've already moved on. And when they realize they've burned their bridges for nothing," she smiled faintly. "That's when the real pain begins." I swallowed hard. Because in that moment I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just a grieving woman telling her neighbor the sad story of betrayal. This was a woman who'd already started planning her revenge, and the way she looked me dead in the eyes as she said it sent chills down my spine. Before I left that night, she said one last thing that stuck with me. At least I didn't lose anything important. Just two people I'd already outgrown. Her tone was flat, almost casual, but I couldn't tell if it was acceptance or something darker. And as I walked back to my house, plate now empty in my hands, one thought echoed in my head. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The night of the confession, I walked back across the street in a daze. The quiet suburban houses around us looked the same as always. Lawns trimmed, porch lights glowing, sprinklers ticking softly in the dark. But nothing felt the same. Because, while my neighbor's house looked dark and silent from the outside, I knew what was brewing inside those walls. A storm. And storms don't just sit quietly. They gather, they build, and eventually, they strike. The next few days were strangely calm. No shouting, no broken glass, no surprise BMW appearances. If anything, the silence felt louder than the drama had. But then, on the fourth day, it began. Saw her outside watering her plants, dressed neatly, makeup on. She wasn't slumped, wasn't hollow-eyed anymore. No, she looked sharp, almost refreshed. When she caught me watching, she gave a little smile. And it wasn't the smile of someone defeated. It was the smile of someone who had decided, game. On that evening, she knocked on my door. I opened it, surprised, and she leaned casually against the frame. "Got a minute?" Of course, I invited her in. We sat at my kitchen table this time, steaming mugs of coffee between us. She tapped her nails against the ceramic, her eyes glinting. "I've been thinking," she began, voice steady. "They think they've won. They think they've built something on my ashes. But you know what happens when you build on ashes?" I tilted my head, waiting. It doesn't last. Her lips curled into that same chilling smirk I'd seen before. And then for the next hour, she laid it all out. The plan unfolds. First, she wanted to cut off her husband's safety nets. "He thinks he's landed on a soft cushion," she said. Moving in with her, borrowing her car, using her money, playing house like he's starting fresh. But what he doesn't realize is, he's stepping into quicksand. And I'm going to make sure of it. She explained how their finances were intertwined. Joint accounts, bills in her name, shared investments. She'd already contacted her lawyer. Papers were in motion. By the time he realized it, she said, he'd be stranded with nothing but his suitcase and a pile of debts. Then came the sister. Her jaw tightened as she spoke. She's always wanted to win. Always wanted to take what's mine. Well, let her have him. Let her choke on the victory. Because once she realizes he's broke, jobless, and desperate, she'll finally understand what I've known for years. He's not a prize. He's a liability. Her tone was icy, her words deliberate. And that's when I realized her revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy or violent. It was going to be slow, calculated, surgical. The kind of revenge that doesn't just hurt, it humiliates. The turning point, but it wasn't just about punishing them. She admitted something that chilled. Me. "I'm not doing this because I miss him," she said, swirling her coffee. I don't even love him anymore. I'm doing this because they underestimated me. Because they thought I'd break. And that," she leaned forward, eyes gleaming, That was their mistake. In that moment, she wasn't a heartbroken wife. She was something else entirely. A strategist. A woman who'd turned her pain into fuel. And as much as it scared me, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration. Because who among us hasn't fantasized about turning betrayal into triumph? About proving the people who hurt us wrong? About watching karma unfold, not in the abstract, but in real time, engineered by our own hands? That was her mission now, and she was just getting started. Seeds of revenge over the next week, I watched. It play out in small, subtle ways. Her husband's car never returned. Rumor in the neighborhood was that he was crashing at the sister's apartment. But then whispers started trickling in. He was struggling. He'd missed work. His boss was furious. Their joint account? Drained, frozen, locked. I didn't have to ask who was behind it. Meanwhile, my neighbor walked through the neighborhood like nothing had happened. Head high, steps confident, as though she was the only one not carrying the weight of the scandal. And the sister? Not a glimpse. The silver BMW didn't show again. It was almost as if the battlefield had shifted behind closed doors. And yet, every time I passed my neighbor, every time I saw that knowing little smile on her face, I understood exactly what was happening. She was pulling the strings. Late night confession, one evening she came by again. This time, she didn't even knock. She just texted, "Wine?" Minutes later, we were sitting on my porch with glasses in hand, the cicadas humming in the summer night. She told me more. How she'd blocked her sister on everything. How she'd cut off her husband's access to their accounts. How she'd made sure her family knew the truth. Not just that he cheated, but who he cheated with. They thought they could make me the villain, she said, her voice low but steady. But I own the narrative now. Everyone knows what they did. Everyone knows what kind of people they are. I didn't just lose a husband, I exposed a snake. Her words sent a shiver down my spine, because it wasn't just revenge anymore. It was control. She wasn't reacting. She was orchestrating. By the time she finished her glass, I realized something. This wasn't the same woman I'd seen screaming barefoot on her porch. This was someone reborn. Sharper, harder, unstoppable, and as much as I feared what she might do next, I couldn't help but think, maybe this was exactly the justice she deserved, because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't fire and fury, it's silence, strategy, and the slow, inevitable crumble of the people who thought they could walk away, unscathed. And from the look in her eyes that night, I knew the crumble had already begun. For weeks, the neighborhood looked calm on the surface. The lawns were still mowed, kids still rode bikes up and down the cul-de-sac, sprinklers still hissed at sunset. But beneath that quiet, a storm was unfolding, and my neighbor was the one. Pulling the levers, the first crack it started with whispers. I overheard two women at the grocery store, neighbors from down the street, talking near the deli counter. Did you hear? He missed another shift. Yeah, apparently HR is breathing down his neck. And she's regretting it already? I didn't even have to ask who they meant. Her husband, ex-husband technically, was unraveling. She'd told me she froze their joint accounts. And sure enough, word spread that he'd been spotted at the gas station fumbling for cash. His credit card? Declined. His savings? Vanished. And while his world was shrinking, hers was expanding. She joined a gym, started driving a new SUV, even signed up for a pottery class. It was like she was flaunting her independence, not in a loud way, but in the subtle, polished manner that screamed, "Look at me, thriving without you." The sister's turn, but the real show began with the sister. At first, the silver BMW was parked proudly outside her apartment. They were playing house, grocery runs together, Instagram stories of date nights, little displays of affection meant to rub salt in old wounds. But then, things shifted. The posts stopped. The smiles faded. And one night, when I was watering my own plants, I saw her sister standing outside their mother's house, phone clutched to her ear, pacing back and forth, her voice carried across the street. "He's draining me, Mom. He's a mess. He doesn't even have money for gas. He's moody, he's late all the time, and honestly, he's not even worth it. My jaw nearly dropped. Because that was it. The prize she'd stolen, the victory she'd paraded, had turned into dead weight. And my neighbor? She orchestrated every piece of it. The family divide. The fallout spread to the family too. Her mom sided with her. Aunts, cousins, even the uncle who never got involved in drama. Every one of them drew a line in the sand. The sister found herself on the wrong side. At a family barbecue, I heard later, people outright refused to sit with her. One cousin apparently said, "You didn't just take your sister's husband. You took her trust, and now you've got nothing left." The sister left in tears. And my neighbor? She wasn't even there. She didn't need to be. The battlefield had shifted, and she'd already won by proxy. The final blow, but the most devastating strike? That came at his job. Her husband had been with his company for years, stable, reliable, that's how everyone saw him. But she knew his weaknesses, his tardiness, his tendency to cut corners, his reliance on her to keep their life organized, and when she cut the cord, it all unraveled. Rumor has it she sent an anonymous tip to HR, documented late arrivals, financial discrepancies, things she alone had access to. She never admitted it outright, but the glint in her eye when she hinted at it told me everything. Within weeks, he was out. Job gone, benefits gone, the career he thought was untouchable, wiped clean. And where did that leave him? Living with her sister. No job, no savings, no family support, and worst of all, no reputation. Because people talk. And in our quiet suburban neighborhood, word spreads faster than wildfire. Watching Karma land one night, I spotted him. He was sitting on the curb outside the sister's apartment, face in his hands, hair unkempt, wearing the same hoodie he'd been in for days. He looked smaller somehow, like all the arrogance had drained out of him. And I swear, my neighbor saw it too. Because that night, she sat on her own porch with a glass of wine, looking across the street at nothing in particular, a faint smile, playing at her lips. Not a laugh, not a gloat. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew. They underestimated me, and they paid for it. My realization. Here's the thing. Revenge stories don't always look like fireworks. They don't always come with slamming doors and shouting matches. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is quiet, precise, and watching her. I realized she didn't just punish them. She dismantled them, piece by piece. Her husband lost his money, his job, his respect. Her sister lost her family, her reputation, and the illusion that she'd won. And my neighbor, she didn't just survive. She ascended. She took betrayal and turned it into leverage. She took heartbreak and turned it into power. And the most haunting part? She never raised her voice again. The look weeks later, she stopped by my house again. We sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee. She looked better than ever, hair done, nails painted, confidence radiating off her in waves, and then she said it. They thought I'd crumble. But I don't crumble, I recalibrate. That one line has stuck with me ever since, because in the end, that's exactly what she did. And I couldn't help but think, if this were a movie, if this were a show, this was the climax. The scene where the villain realizes they're not the villain at all. They're the survivor, the strategist, the one pulling the strings. And sitting across from her, hearing the calm in her voice, I realized something chilling. She wasn't done. Yet, because the best revenge stories, they don't end with destruction, they end with transformation. And from the look in her eyes that night, I knew. This wasn't just revenge. This was rebirth. By the time the dust finally settled, the neighborhood looked exactly the same. Kids still rode scooters down the sidewalks. The mail truck still rattled by at noon. Porch lights still clicked on at dusk. But behind the neat hedges and smiling, nods, everybody knew, the scandal, the betrayal, the revenge. It had seeped into the fabric of our street, whispered over coffee, dissected at backyard barbecues, and at the center of it all, my neighbor. The new normal weeks turned into months. Her husband never came back. His car was gone for good, and so was his job. I heard through the grapevine he was couch hopping between friends, that the sister finally kicked him out after realizing he wasn't a partner. He was a parasite. The sister herself? She'd vanished. No more BMW visits, no more smug appearances. She'd blocked half the family and retreated to another city, tail tucked between her legs. And my neighbor? She thrived. I'd see her jogging in the mornings, earbuds in, ponytail, bouncing. She joined a book club, started redecorating her house, even threw a wine and cheese night that half the neighborhood showed up to. It was like watching someone shed an old skin and step into a sharper, brighter version of themselves. But beneath the confidence, there was something else, something colder. She hadn't just survived the betrayal. She'd used it, transformed it, and I could tell she was never going to be the same again. A conversation that stuck one evening, a few months after it all began, she invited me over. Her kitchen looked different, warmer, brighter, new paint on the cabinets, fresh flowers on the table. She poured us both glasses of wine and leaned back in her chair with that signature half smile. "You know what the funny part is?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "They thought they took something from me, but really, they set me free." I blinked. "Free?" She nodded slowly. "Free from the marriage I'd already checked out of. Free from a sister who never truly loved me. Free from playing small, from pretending. They thought they were punishing me. But in the end, they punished themselves." Her words hit me harder than I expected, because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all of us who've ever been betrayed, underestimated, or cast aside. It was about realizing that sometimes the most devastating thing people can do to you is also the best gift they'll ever give, the neighborhood's view. The rest of the block didn't see the late-night wine talks, the whispered confessions, or the meticulous planning. They only saw the aftermath. They saw a woman scorned, but not destroyed. A woman betrayed, but not broken. They saw her walking taller, smiling wider, while the two people who tried to tear her down were nowhere to be found. And let me tell you, people noticed. I caught one of the neighbors saying to her in passing, "You're stronger than most. Anyone else would have crumbled." She just smiled, thanked them politely, and walked on. But I knew better. She hadn't just avoided crumbling. She'd weaponized the rubble. Quiet triumphs. The most chilling part wasn't the revenge itself. It wasn't the frozen accounts or the ruined job or the family estrangement. It was the quiet, the calm way she handled it all. The way she refused to let them see her sweat. The way she orchestrated their downfall not with screaming or chaos, but with silence and strategy. It was the kind of revenge that seeps under your skin. The kind you don't see coming until it's too late. And honestly, it made me think. Because how many of us in her position would have screamed, begged, lashed out, maybe even begged them to stay? Not her. She turned pain into power. And that's what made it satisfying to watch. Not just because she got even, but because she became untouchable in the process. The lesson? I still think about her words sometimes. At least I didn't lose anything important. Just two people I outgrew anyway. At the time it sounded cold, maybe even cruel, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. She hadn't lost. She'd been liberated. And the lesson? When people betray you, when they underestimate you, when they think they've broken you, they're usually revealing more about themselves than about you. And sometimes the best revenge isn't what you take from them. It's what you refuse to let them take from you. Closure, the last time we talked about it, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "They'll never get another ounce of my energy. I already got what I needed. Proof that I'm stronger without them. That's the real win." And with that, she closed the chapter. No more scheming, no more updates, just a clean, decisive line in the sand. And as much as the drama-loving part of me wanted a part 3 or part 4, I knew she was right. The story was over, at least for her. My reflection, for me, I'll never forget it. Not because it was the wildest scandal our street had ever seen, not because it felt like living in the middle of a soap opera, but because it reminded me of something deeper. That betrayal doesn't define you. Your response does, and when you choose to respond with strength, with strategy, with silence instead of screaming, you don't just survive, you win. Epilogue. Her husband? Last I heard, he was still drifting. Odd jobs, no stability, no support. A shadow of who he used to be. Her sister? Moved states away. No contact with the family, no friends left here, reputation in ruins. And her? She's still here, thriving, hosting wine nights, planting flowers, living her life like nothing ever happened. Except something did happen. She was betrayed. She was underestimated. She was left for dead, and she turned it into the greatest comeback I've ever seen. And maybe that's the lesson we should all take away. When life tries to bury you, don't just climb out. Rise, flourish, and make sure the people who tried to bury you never forget just how badly they underestimated you. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't payback, it's becoming untouchable.